Okay, so here's one of the hats I'd like you to wear when we're going through this together is, I know there's a lot of educators out here, or teaching assistants and other people that are thinking about being professors and so on. So think about this with that hat on. How does Joseph approach this subject? Pretend that this is, you're talking with someone in a different university department, or the true test is always a family member of yours, to talk to them about why this all matters. So a lot of times I come back to, okay, what are some key issues? And the important thing, I think, is that we come up with a list. You and I could have a chat about this. We come up with some sort of list. It could be a lot longer than this, I realize. But these are not just things that we, as the geo community, right, care about. These are issues that the general public now is thinking about, talking about. I spend a lot of time on airport shuttles. So I hear these conversations, and people are now talking about this, right? It's in the news media, you hear it in libraries and on buses and so on. People actually do care about this stuff. So maybe one of your jobs as a geo-evangelist person, right, because we all need to carry that torch, I think. It's part of our responsibility to the society. But one of the things you could do is say, you know what, there is a subject that actually deals with all these things, and it is called geography, and it actually does matter to 21st century society, beyond academia even. So then you could say, well, all of these issues have a geographic component, and therefore they can be studied with geographic tools and the geographic perspective, and having some content knowledge, right? Content knowledge is important, right? It's often maligned because it is, I think, so often associated with stuff people have to memorize. Gosh, we're in the 21st century now. Can we get beyond that? Can we realize that there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can look up, and what we really want to do is to foster critical thinking, spatial thinking, that type of thing. So, but content knowledge is still important, right? If you're making a map, you folks that are in GIS, right, of the Köppen climate zones and so on, and you're overlaying some other information. Nowadays, it's so easy to grab, ooh, here's a data set, here's a data set, here's a data set. Now I've got it all overlaid in my desktop or my online GIS. Do I know anything about what I'm talking about? You need that content knowledge. It's still important. It's critically important. So that's what we want to concentrate on, is the content knowledge, this perspective of how we see the world as geographers, environmental scientists, and the other disciplines that are represented here in the room. How do we do that? So I think, as I indicated earlier, that there are three converging forces that are acting to bolster our efforts in the world. And one of those is the challenges that I talked about earlier, right? All of those things we can name, energy, water, political instability, etc., right, are now in the general public consciousness, right? And they are realizing that these are local to global issues. They are global issues that increasingly impact our everyday lives, okay? So that is, I think, lending a big boost to what we're doing. Whether we can translate that into support for our individual departments and universities, we'll have that conversation, but at least that's acting in our favor, I think. And also, when I used to come home from the USGS way back in the 20th century, ooh, I got to look at an aerial photo all day at work. Wow, that was so cool. Well, how many people have looked at satellite images and historical maps and overlaid a bunch of different vector layers in the time that you and I have been chatting? I mean, millions, right? So these tools are becoming mainstream. Now, way back when, the first GPS I used fit into the back of a utility van at USGS. Okay? It's this huge thing. So, and you may remember this, for those of you that have been around a little while, when you used to go geocaching with your GPS, you'd get on someone's piece of land, and go, what are you doing with that? What is that thing? Well, I'm trying to find a geocache with latitude and longitude. Well, how does that work? Now that's becoming mainstream, right? And so there are lots of tools that are becoming mainstream that were formerly in the realm of just our community, which I think is also helping, because it lends the common ground for the conversations that we can have. And also these geo-enabled devices that go hand in hand with the tools, right? So way back when, the old cartography and GIS labs, they all had a what associated with them? Beside every monitor and beside every keyboard was a ... A digitizing. What's a digitizing camera? Because if you wanted to analyze California watersheds, guess what? You had to collect that data, and you're like, what? Yeah. So oftentimes we would steer toward areas of the world, and this is still true to some extent, but hopefully much less now, and I believe much less now, where the data existed. Okay? Now it's, I really want to study topic X, and okay, hopefully pretty often there's data, not everywhere, right? There's different resolutions and so on and so forth in different places around the planet, but it's much better now than it was. Not a perfect world, and we'll talk more about that, but one thing to note here is that now that we've got a plethora of data, what about data quality? Now that anybody can put data up in the cloud, right? You know, in 1965, the Rolling Stones said, "Hey, you, get off my cloud." Good answer. Now we're saying get on the... Remember the Rolling Stones? Who's that anyway? Gosh, you guys are still doing it, and we're still doing it. Anyway, the point is that we're saying put up data on the cloud. Okay, well, the good news is that people can easily put data, map data on the internet. The bad news is that people can put data on the internet in map form. So your challenge is, how do you sift through, right, the plethora of data and decide what is of good quality? And if it's good quality but it's not documented, can you trust it? And all those sorts of issues. And then, what about privacy, locational privacy? I mean, these are all issues that surround this whole cloud-based environment. But I am very thankful that we have that, because it's led for so many cross-collaboratory conversations now that we couldn't have when I couldn't give data to you because, oh shoot, I've got this big old satellite image and it's too big and you can't fit it on your computer, and all that kind of clunkiness. Still some clunkiness, but a lot of it has gone away, which is great.